everything in Europe that the European establishments don't like is called populism. So whether you're talking about the Podemos in Spain, or Syria in Greece, or whether you're talking about the Front National in France, everything that goes against the outlook of the prevailing political establishment gets called populism. And so I began to look at this question, and almost immediately I realized that what was more interesting wasn't populism, because I don't think there is such a phenomenon in that general sense. Unless you want to call everything populist, then it becomes meaningless. I think what's really interesting for me in the book is anti-populism. And what's interesting is that it begins with being called populist, and then you wait a second, and then you call it nationalist. And then before you can finish the word nationalist, you say it's xenophobic. And before you finish xenophobic, you're homophobic. And it goes on and on and on, and there's this kind of list of bad things. I came to the conclusion that the reason why there is this political atmosphere, this powerful anti-populist movement, is because of the normative crisis of the European Union. In other words, the lack of legitimacy of the institutions of the European Union, where they have a lack of clarity about what are the values they really stand for. And when I looked further, it became clear to me that it wasn't just the European Union, but most West European countries really have a crisis of values about what it is that, what does it mean to be British? What does it mean to be French? What does it mean to be German? What are the values to live by? In the language that is used, there's no distinction made between being, having patriotic sentiments, or identifying with your nation, or feeling at home with a particular national culture. All those things were seen as being the same as extreme nationalism. It's almost like nationalism, it was used as a kind of precursor to being a Nazi. It's almost like, there's an argument that nationalism almost inevitably, it's like a slippery slope, leads to Nazism, which of course is the very opposite of reality, because we know that democracy, liberalism, individualism all emerged exactly the same time as nationalism did in the French Revolution. We live in an age of identity politics, right? When you go out on a university, every identity is okay. You could be a trans person, that's okay. A woman or a gender identity, that's okay. You could be disabled, have that identity, that's okay. Every identity is all right, except for national identity. That's not okay. And therefore what you've got is this kind of process whereby identity becomes denationalized, and you end up promoting all these other identities as a way of morally condemning what a national identity is. And that's something I write about in the book. And I write about it not because I'm a nationalist, although I like nation, I've got no problems with that, but because I think it's very dangerous. If you take away people's national memory and you take away their national identity, then you leave them with very, very little, and you end up doing precisely what the Stalinists used to try to do in many parts of East Europe and in the Soviet Union.
Според вас има ли аспекти на режима на Орбан, които заслужават да бъдат критикувани по някакъв начин?
I don't defend Orban as a government for its policies. I defend Orban and Hungary insofar as they take the question of national sovereignty seriously. I think sovereignty is really quite important. And insofar as they provide basically what Orban is saying is that there is more than one way of running politics. There is an alternative to the mainstream in the EU, and I think that's a really good development. Because, when the Greeks were in trouble, they had governments imposed on them. When the Italians were in trouble, you had Monti and then Renzi imposed upon them. And the message was, Italians and Greeks, you're bad boys, you got to do what we tell you in Brussels. And Orban, at least, had the political courage to say, well, actually, that's maybe good for you, but we have a different approach.
През 70-те години вие основавате революционната комунистическа партия на Великобритания, т.е. вие тръгвате от едни изключително леви позиции и правите тази, така както изглежда на редовия ви читател най-вече, траектория идеологическа към, ако човек го приема за поддръжник на Орбан, вие казахте, че имате критики, но кои са книгата може да бъде прочетена като подкрепа на режима на Орбан. Тази бега води към дясното, център дясно или малко по-дясно и център дясно. Дали можете да рефлектирате върху това свое развитие? Какви са промените в света около вас, които го предизвикаха?
Many people that call themselves left wing, I don't like. Their political imagination is very prescriptive. They're very intolerant. They're very censorious. They're very illiberal. I mean, they are as illiberal as Orban is. At least Orban admits that he's illiberal. They are illiberal in practice, while they pretend to be liberal. Where I began to change my mind is when I began to realize that in the Anglo-American world, in Europe, most political debates and disputes are no longer in the political domain, but are in what Hannah Arendt, the political theorist, calls the pre-political domain. So I noticed since the 1980s that all the big disputes are not about social justice, they're not about changing the world this way as opposed to that way. They're about the pre-political issues like the family, they're about relationships, they're about identity, they're about sort of fundamental pre-political values. Ultimately, and this is something it took me a long time to discover, they're about intergenerational sort of relation and interaction. And one of the things that has happened is that the left, sadly, began to be very interested in disrupting intergenerational dynamics, seeing that as a problem and as a wrong thing, and loyalties that are based on intergenerational things are seen as being horrible. In 1968, I organized a sit-in at university, closed the university down. And afterwards, I'm very happy that we closed the university down. I went for a drink, and all my friends, were saying, they were all talking about their families as if they're really horrible. My horrible mother, my horrible father. And when they looked at me and they said, well, what about you? I said, well, I love my mother. We don't agree on many things, but we love each other. And at the time, I thought that was because I was Hungarian and they were Canadian English. But then I realized actually it was much more than that. And it had to do with the fact that just because I'm politically very radical, doesn't mean to say that there aren't loyalties, pre-political loyalties, intergenerational connections that are not important.
Виктор Орбан вярва в суверенната демокрация и мисли, че суверенитета на гласоподавателя не бива да бъде ограничаван. Защо е в Европейския съюз? Това е проблемът. Суверенната демокрация е напълно легитимен проект, но той не може да съществува като такъв вътре в Европейския съюз. Неконсистентността на позицията е, че ако той наистина вярва силно в това, че той иска да създаде суверенна демокрация, това, което трябва да направи, е това, което направи Великобритания. Да излезе, тъй като не е възможно идеята за тотален суверенитет да бъде примирена с факта, че много от решенията, които се взимат, зависят и засягат хора, които са извън националната общност. Едно от най-спорните неща е свързано с факта, че зад идеята за създаване на национална и суверенна демокрация се появява идеята за монополизацията на властта. Идеята за супермнозинство. От тази гледна точка, ако помислиш, че една от политическите партии вътре в политическата система е представител на националния интерес, тогава всички други партии започват да изглеждат като антинационални. Тогава всъщност ти не си просто противник на правителството, а всеки противник на правителството започва да се мисли като противник на държавата, противник на нацията.
In Europe, we don't have a very good example of how Republican nationalism, what it looks like in practice, and it's our job to promote the idea of sort of our classical democratic impulses, which is integral to nationalism, to bring that to the service and to really make democracy come alive, because we need to have a kind of democracy that's not selective, that democracy for all rather than for us.
Една от особеностите, които ми се вижда, е, че колкото повече чрез света става общ и хората познават с един друг, много е по-лесно да пътуват. Виждаме криза на всички универсални идеологии. Вие говорите за кризата на универсализма в ляво. Но погледнете какво се случва включително с католическата църква. Тъй като от една страна правителството твърди много силно християнска традиция, от друга страна, когато става дума за мигрантския въпрос, основният противник всъщност е папата. В този смисъл самото християнство изведнъж започва да се мисли като националистическо, като част от националната характеристика, което за православния свят на живота не е нещо ново. При нас това е било част от традицията, това не е била част от традицията вътре в католическия свят. И за мен това ми е интересно, до каква степен всъщност глобализацията не води до кризата на всички универсалистски идеологии. Всъщност най-универсалистски настроеният човек е Кант, който не излиза от своя град и всъщност не виждал никого. Може би единственият начин да останеш универсалист е просто да си стоиш вкъщи. Вторият ми въпрос е свързан с нещо важно, което споменахте и аз съм съгласен с това, че ние не може би греша, но виждаме в момента една културна вълна, която е много сходна в своята динамика и обратна в движение на това, което се случва 68 година, след 68 година. Но тогава цялата фиксация върху правата на малцинствата, право на идентичност, политика на идентичност имат само малцинствата. Сега всъщност виждаме надигане на политиката на идентичност на мнозинствата. Да бъда честен, аз нямам проблем с това при едно условие. Ако мнозинството се мислиш политическо, поне за мен е чар на демокрацията е, че ти не знаеш как ще изглежда това мнозинство. То не е зададено. То нека си се конструира от различни групи. То се решава на всички избори. Ако обаче то се мисли цяло през такъв тип етнически характеристики, тогава се стига до ситуацията добре позната на Балканите, която е единствената ти позиция, защо аз да бъда малцинство в твоята държава, когато ти носи малцинство в моята.
It's the least interesting part of who you are. It's a biological accident and of no great moment. And I think it's very tragic that identity politics is sweeping the whole world. And you now have even this grotesque development in America of white identity, sort of as a reaction to the whole whiteness, sort of crusade. And I think that to me is the death of politics, because when you have identity as being so fundamentally important, then it doesn't matter what you do as a human agent. It's who you are by definition. And I've never seen those universalistic principles and values held in such low regard by people across the sort of political spectrum as now. And I do think that we are tragic, and the Catholic Church is the same. I think it's interesting. I'm not Christian, but at least, the one good thing about the Catholic Church was, only good thing about the Catholic Church, was its universalistic aspiration in the old days. Now, it cannot even speak the language of universalism anymore in the way that it used in the past, and it's apologizing for its kind of past universal. So that is a huge problem, and I think that means that what we have are particularisms, which is all right, but particularisms become a problem when they're not tempered by a universalistic impulse. It's the dialectical relationship.
Balázs Ádám from Hungary. Furedi, I would like to say one thing. I agree with you. Hungary is really a nice place. State of law, constitutional guarantees, freedom of press, the main newspaper disappearing from one day to the other because its readers disappear, vanish from one day to the other. Average anti-Semitism, Jewish people happily dancing in the streets, Muslim people happily not. Nothing to fear. No hate speech, average hate speech. Hungary is really a nice place. This is why I live in Bulgaria.
Смятате ли в крайна сметка, че този европейски проект, който тръгва от 45-та, който тръгва всъщност след войната, е точно такъв баланс между универсализъм и партикуларизъм? Обединена Европа не е ли в крайна сметка тази рамка, в която универсалното може да съжителства по един разумен начин с партикуларистично. И наистина, ако погледнем те над 50 години след войната, това е момента, в който имаме най-сериозен разцвет на националните идентичности. Аз не виждам в Западна Европа, не виждам и в Европейския съюз като цяло потиснати националности, на които, както вие казахте, едва ли не като в сталинистки режим им се забранява националната идентичност. И определено не споделям тази теза, че националната идентичност е забранена идентичност. Не го виждам това нещо. Напротив, има най-различни, според мен, в рамките на Европа национални идентичности, които намират защита по най-различен начин, каталанска идентичност, всякакви други. Може би това е такава среда, в която националните идентичности в крайна сметка се чувстват по-добре, отколкото във всяка една друга среда.
See, you raise an interesting point. The European Union is very good at protecting national minorities everywhere. Regionalism. Every time you go to Spain or Portugal, they have big regional European flags celebrating, sort of Catalan or Basque or any other kind of nationalism. And I think what it's really doing is basically it promotes regional identity. It promotes every identity as a way of disaggregating national identity. And I think that's the political practice. So that regional identities are okay because they weaken the meaning of the nation. That's the point I was really getting at. And I think if you go to Holland, if you go to most parts of Western Europe, you'll find that their sense of national identity has become very, very weak. I studied German history at great length, and I think there are many, many explanations as to why fascism emerged in Nazi Germany. And you could explain that very, very easily without saying that nationalism was the cause. In other words, the idea that somehow nationalism leads step by step towards this xenophobic hysteria violates history. German nationalism sort of has its good sides and its bad sides, but it doesn't, the reason why fascism and Nazism has got to do with the social crises that afflicted Europe at that particular time. A social crisis that had roots that were quite independent of nationalism, and it seems to me that we lose our sense of history if you see it in that way. Nationalism can lead to very many things, but it's not nationalism that leads to bad things, it's nationalist. Nationalism is an idea about the nation. It's nationalist, a particular kind of nationalist. Human beings. In the Balkans, in Yugoslavia, it wasn't Serb nationalism that was the problem. Right? It wasn't Croatian nationalism. It was the nationalist political leaders who were the problem. And it wasn't because they woke up one morning and they had this ideology in their head. It was for other reasons that they behaved in such a horrible, destructive kind of a way. So what I'm really saying is you cannot reduce the problems of the world to nationalism, because if you do, then you've got a lot of problems explaining all the good things that nationalism has done. I mean, everything that is good about liberalism, about democracy, about civic virtues, I mean, everything comes alongside with nationalism.
Създаването на революционна комунистическа партия, това, което той е направил на времето, казахте, че нямате усещането, че вие сте се променило, а че времето се е променило, защото тогава не създадохте революционна националистическа партия. След това имам още един въпрос, извинявайте, но ми се видя много интересно. Говорихте за междупоколенческата вярност и за политическите лоялности. И изпитах силно любопитство от какво е семейството ви, защо 68 година толкова много сте харесвал своите родители. И третия въпрос също е много кратък, извинявам се. В кой исторически период на Унгария я намирате най-хубава? Този сега ли?
Реално национализъм и шовинизъм не се ли крепи на стереотипа, непознаване на културите, на етническите малцинства и това не е ли стигмата?
Не смятате ли, че това е един голям проблем за посткомунистическите общества, когато диалога се насочва именно в насока етническа враждебност и един вид едва ли не националните идеали да се ограничават до някакви етнически проблеми и всъщност да не може да се направи този преход към универсализма, за който говорите, където да се издигат и коментират ценности като свободата, като свободомислието, етика на свободата и толерантност. И всъщност не само да търсиме някъде в историята да се правим толерантни, а всъщност да изграждаме самосъзнание, защото всяка една нация има нужда от това да си създаде своя наратив, да си създаде своето мислене и поведение. Какво значи да бъдем толерантни? Какво значи свободата за нас да е ценност и да я зачитаме в ежедневния си живот? И какво значи всъщност да развием етика, която да дава възможност на тази нация да върви към някакво по-положително развитие? Благодаря.
Популизмът, какъвто го виждаме сега, е постфашистски феномен. И голямата разлика в отношението към насилието и трансформиращата роля на насилието. Значи, все пак, в своята основна същност, фашизмът е революционно движение, което вярва в трансформиращата роля на насилието. И не случайно това е общества през 30-те години, които са общества създадени от бивши войници. Това са хора върнали се от войната. В този смисъл отношението към насилието, за това много често едни и същи думи. Това не е за оправдаване или за да станат по-симпатични тия движения, но си мисля, че ако историческите контексти бъдат премахвани и ние непрекъснато използваме думите извън историческия им контекст, това също не ни помага да разберем за какво става дума. По отношение на суверенната демокрация, между другото, идеята за суверенна демокрация, първият голям дебат е от Русия. Значи, това е веднага след Украинската революция 2004 година, започва създаването на идеята за суверенна демокрация и тук една много особена идея за демокрация всъщност се промотира. И то е демокрацията като идентичност на народа със своя лидер. Всъщност това е големия проблем. Затова, всъщност, ако има демократичен режим, по който е трудно да смениш властта, която си избрал, има проблем с тази идея за демокрация.
The reason why I didn't form the revolutionary nationalist party, because I'm not a nationalist, as it happens. I've got no nationalist, sentiments. I do, I'm very sympathetic to people that do. As it happens, because I left Hungary when I was 9, grew up in Canada, I left Canada when I was 20, went to England. I've never had the opportunity to be nationalist, ever. Which it has its good things and its bad things. My family, I loved. Besides, I think it's normal for people to love their family. I don't think it's unusual. But I love two things about my family. My mother was in a concentration camp in 44, and she just said, fuck it, I'm going to live my life. And she became a very strong woman who had a good sense of humor, a real fighter. My dad was in the Hungarian Revolution in '56, as was my sister. They were very active in the 5th district of Budapest, and that's why we had to leave, and they were always fighting. And, we always argued, and my father was very angry at me when I formed the Revolutionary Communist Party. I said, my son formed the Revolutionary Communist Party, how horrible that is. And he said, nevertheless, we're Furedi, we're the same family. We can argue and discuss and everything else. And I had the same thing. My son 2 years ago decided that he was going to support Corbyn in the Labour Party. I don't think very much of Corbyn. I think he's not very interesting. We had a huge argument, just like I had my father. And I think that's a good, lovely thing to have. And I think families that argue and fight with each other, sort of form strong bonds. So that's what I was. I think the best period of Hungary's history was in October 1956, where, with my own eyes, I saw people that were too scared to open their mouths, who walked around looking at their shoelaces because they were so worried about the world. The same people that were so scared about the life, in a couple of weeks just took matters into their own hands and they made a revolution. So that's what gives me optimism about the future, that if Hungarians, ordinary Hungarian people who were intimidated, could rise up and imagine that they could change the world, then why not Bulgarians, and why not French or other kind of people? We all have that potential within us. It just, being in the right place at the right time, with the right ideas,